All right, hi, welcome. So today's class, we're going to do some techniques and postures that will be good for stress and anxiety and overall emotional stability. This sequence, I've actually taken a lot of the postures that we'll be doing from the book Light on Life, where there's a sequence for emotional stability in the back. So some of these shapes that we do are specifically for hormonal balance and to help release stress and anxiety. We're going to start off just doing a little warm-up before we get into holding these shapes. Most of this practice is going to be mellow, more yin, restorative, but I'm going to have us do a couple of stretches to warm up. So begin standing at the front of your mat. Take your feet hip distance apart. Stand tall, balanced over your ankles. Then stretch your arms up and overhead. Exhale, fold forward. Let's do a lunge sequence. Inhale, stretch the chest, lengthen your spine. Step your left leg back into a lunge. Lower your knee down, point the toes back. Bring your hands to your right knee and start to upright yourself. So let's at first move deep into the lunge to open through the front of the hip. Then bring your hips more upright over your knee. Pull your right thigh bone back in, raise your arms and stretch the arms up. Press down through the left shin, grow tall through the sides of the waist. Then bring your hands down. Bring your right hand to your knee, press your chest open. Then bring your hand down, curl the back toes, lift the back knee up, and stretch your back leg. Step the back foot an inch closer, and then straighten the right leg as best you can. Then bend your knee. Step your back leg forward. Inhale, flat back. Exhale, fold deeper. Inhale, flat back. Step the right leg back. Lower the knee down. Point the toes back. Bring your hands to your left knee and start to upright yourself. Stretch down through the front of the hip, inner thigh, down towards the knee. Then bring the hips back over top of the right knee. Pull your left thigh bone in, navel in, raise your arms up. Then bring hands back down. Plant the right hand, bring the left hand to the knee and start to roll the chest open. Good, bring your left hand down, curl back toes, lift back knee up, stretch the back leg. Then step the back foot an inch closer and stretch the left leg as straight as you can. Stretch from the inner foot down, pull the left hip back. Then bend the knee and step your back foot forward. Bring your hands to your hips and come up to stand. So in all these postures that we do, let's start with Uttanasana, hands on the hips, fold forward. In all these postures that we do, we want to get the feeling that the mind is being soothed and calm. So if you need to back off or take modifications or variations, if it's unsettling the shape that you're in, then please do that. But if you feel like you can settle easily into Uttanasana with the legs relatively straight, please do. Grab the elbows and let the head hang. If you have very tight hamstrings, just bend your knees so it's not as intense of a pull. Then change the clasp of the elbows. Then release, and we'll come into downward facing dog. If downward facing dog is a lot of strain on the shoulders or the neck, then you could just take child's pose. Otherwise, downward dog. Then walk the hands and feet together. Come up to stand. And we're going to take Prasarita Padottanasana with head support. So I'll use a block. Step your feet wide apart. Put your hands down. Make a flat back with the hands down. And then fold forward all the way. If you can't get your head all the way down onto a block, you could always just put a chair in front of you and rest your arms on a chair like this with your forehead on the chair. Then inhale, flat back, hands onto your hips, come up to stand. All right, so the next pose that you're going to hold is downward facing dog on your forearms or Shirshasana. And then child's pose. And then come up. All right, we're going to do a supported back bend, very toned down version of Dvipada Viparita Dandasana. So for this, I'm going to use a roller with a blanket over top, but you could use a block with a blanket over top or whatever other stuff you have that you can back bend over. We'll see how this works. So I'm going to position the roller just below my shoulder blades. Hands go behind my head, And then I'm just going to let my chest start to roll over, hands like they're in a headstand position. And bring your chin back in towards your chest. And come up. Sit up tall for a moment. Good. Now let's do Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, supported bridge pose. So for this one, you're going to have your block. You'll bend your knees, lift your hips up, and slide the block underneath your sacrum. And then we're going to do one-legged extended variation. So you'll reach the middle of the tailbone down towards the block, and without twisting the hips, stretch your right leg out along the floor. So you'll feel the deep pull across the inner front hip. Feel the stretch across the hip, but stay balanced across the middle tail. So in yoga, we think of this area as energetically being the gateway of energy up into the spine. Scientifically, according to some research that I read as of, this is like 5 or 6 years ago, that how we stretch the hips affects the cortisol levels. So when we stretch and open the hips in certain ways, it helps to balance the hormones. Then rebend the knee and stretch the left leg out. This posture in particular, combined with Viparita Karani, legs up the wall with support in the lumbar, is supposed to be really good for stress and anxiety. And also good for depression. And another one of my favorite books about the psoas, it warns you against doing this pose right before bed because of all the energy that is released when you start to release the psoas. So it looks like we've been able to find more recently scientifically what the yogis were experiencing as they practice. We're trying to give explanations, energetic explanations to what was happening in the body. All right. Then rebend that knee and lift your hips up. Move the block off to the side, lower the hips down. Take your arms out to the side. This is just a little pose that I'm adding to the sequence. Take the knees over to the left. And then take your left ankle and cross it to the outside of your right knee. Stretch the right knee down away from you. Then uncross the legs Back to center, feet the width of the mat. Let the knees fall over to the right. And if you need to intensify the stretch, cross the right ankle just on the outside of the left knee. Stretch the knee down and away from you. Then uncross the leg, roll over to your side, and press yourself up. All right, now we're gonna do Viparita Karani with support in the lumbar spine. So I have a bolster that I like to use for that. You could just fold 2 yoga blankets, one on top of the other if you don't have a bolster, or you could put a pillow underneath your lower back if you don't have yoga blankets. But to do this one, I'll lie down close to the wall, my hips, buttocks about 12 inches away from the wall. And I'm just giving that space because I know that most people have tight hamstrings. If your hamstrings are very open, then you could go closer to the wall. You don't have to give yourself this much space. But you want it so that your legs can straighten and release evenly. So if you're very tight in your back body, you'll scoot even further away from the wall. And take the arms into a cactus shape or arms at your side. Let your chest open as your legs stretch. This isn't supposed to feel like a big intense stretch. You're just supposed to be able to relax and release and allow the shift in circulation and allow the tension in the feet to release now that they're being elevated up above the heart. And then bend the knees. Roll over to your right side. And come up. Have a seat now on your bolster, pillow, blankets, whatever you got. And bring the soles of the feet together, knees wide apart. Baddha Konasana. So this shape in particular, I believe, is the one that in the study that I was referring to earlier about the stretch across the hips and the inner thighs. This was the posture in particular, as well as Supta Sukhasana. Stretch your feet evenly into each other, the heels, the big toe mounds, the little toe mounds, and let the inner leg stretch. Groins towards the knees. Grow tall through your spine as you release from the groins into the knees. Then bring your knees back up and stretch your legs wide apart. Fold forward halfway and take your big toes if possible. If you can't grab your big toes, you could strap your feet, whatever you can get. I'm going to sit flat for this one. And then come back up. All right, so the last one we're going to do is a supported variation of Supta Virasana. So because I have a bad knee, I'm going to take my Supta Virasana support up a little bit higher by putting blocks underneath my bolster. We'll see how this goes. If you have a knee or lower back or ankle situation that is so bad that it would be a bad idea for you to try to take this next shape, then you could just work on low lunge, which I'm going to show first. Low lunge is where you have a foot forward, a knee down, and you work on stretching and opening your hip this way. Okay. So just remember, when you're practicing, the first concept in yoga, in the sutras, is ahimsa. When you're practicing your practice, when you're practicing asana postures, we want to make sure that we're not causing violence to any of the parts of the body. So even if you're like, okay, I made it into the shape, but it feels really gnarly on my knee joint or my lower back, then you don't just want to like stay and suffer it out, because we want to practice nonviolence. So if you feel like I can be in this shape, but it's really bad for my body, then you come out right away and just do the first one that I showed. Otherwise, if it feels okay on your body, you feel like you're getting a good stretch in your quads, then you can take your elbows and stretch your arms overhead. Then change the clasp of the elbows. All right, so if you're totally comfortable in this position, you could just stay in this position for Shavasana. Otherwise, come out and stretch your legs out and lie flat for corpse pose. But now I recommend 5, maybe 10 minutes if you can in Shavasana today. And I just want to thank you so much for practicing today. Remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button,